Epidemics have altered the course of human history time and time again. The first European settlers brought diseases to the New World that decimated the native populations they encountered. Since then, epidemics in what is now the United States have killed millions of people and changed not only how and where we live, but also how we treat and take care of ourselves and each other. As time goes on, we as a people increase our knowledge and ability to survive these plagues. But with knowledge comes power, and with power comes responsibility. Which leads to the question, what responsibility does society have towards those who fall ill during an epidemic? In this video, we will examine how early Americans answered this question, how their answer changed from the colonial period to the early republic, and how we address the problem of epidemics in the United States today. By the 1600s, the Native American population had been nearly eradicated by virgin soil epidemics introduced by European explorers. In 1616, one such epidemic swept coastal New England from Cape Cod to Maine, killing as many as 9 out of every 10 people it touched. Europeans held the Christian belief that God had given them dominion over the world and everything in it, absolving them of responsibility to the point that King James of England said, "Almighty God in his great goodness and bounty towards us and our people hath thought fit and determined that those large and goodly territories, deserted as it were by their natural inhabitants, should be possessed and enjoyed by such of our subjects." Taking responsibility for the sick were the native tribes themselves, but they had no knowledge of contagion and didn't practice quarantine. Traditional remedies like sweat lodges and rituals were ineffective and entire tribes were lost. A few managed to adapt, like the Catawba, who were composed of the survivors of various southern Piedmont tribes. The Catawba took it upon themselves to take action and show political leadership, acknowledging their own responsibility for their people who couldn't develop immunities for this once lethal disease that nearly wiped out their culture and ancient cultural knowledge. The 1700s saw little improvement in the way government leaders handled epidemics. In 1702, New York experienced an epidemic of yellow fever. The Common Council stated, "The Almighty God hath for our manifold sins, immorality, and profaneness been pleased to visit us at this time with great sickness and mortality," believing that God meant for some people to be afflicted, and that it was the Christian obligation to offer help through charity. Their only course of action was to outlaw the burning of lime and oyster shells, as well as the distilling of rum, which were supposedly the cause of this distemper. However, by the summer of 1793, the idea of contagion had started to take root. Another outbreak of yellow fever began when French refugees arrived at the port of Philadelphia, the new republic's capital. When a man was found dead on the steps of the Capitol building, government leaders including George Washington, the State Assembly, and the city's council, as well as 20,000 residents, fled for safety, abandoning the city and those too sick to travel. Taking up the responsibility for his city, Mayor Matthew Clarkson stayed and organized a group of citizens to come up with ways to care for the people of Philadelphia. Among them was Dr. Benjamin Rush, who turned a nearby mansion into a hospital, and Richard Allen of the Free African Society, who volunteered his efforts to encourage African Americans to stay and care for the sick. Again, those at the top took little responsibility for their society's health, leaving local leaders to shoulder the weight for the safety of their neighbors, for research and treatment, for communication, and for moving forward once the crisis had passed. In the 1800s, multiple outbreaks of cholera started to see different attitudes towards the cause and treatment of the disease. When the epidemic first emerged during the second cholera pandemic in 1826, people didn't know how it spread and believed that poisons or bad air created the disease. The government at last took on the responsibility to investigate cholera, eventually discovering that diarrheal and vomited fluids of infected persons seemed to be the way the disease was transmitted. For the next 50 years, doctors uncovered more clues to help them in their struggle against cholera, and society became more ready to battle the disease. In 1873, cholera again attacked the United States. Few physicians clung to traditional anti-contagionist theories, but their inadequacy had become more apparent with each succeeding cholera epidemic. Dozens of communities, large and small, took action. They responsibly utilized prophylactic methods, which had protected New York in 1866. The success of these procedures provided conclusive evidence for the theories upon which they were based. In 1878, germ theory emerged, and society now had the knowledge needed to take the responsibility for the health of its members properly. Over 100 years later, the United States finds itself in the middle of another epidemic. The novel coronavirus emerged in Wuhan, China, and since the Chinese government's announcement of the epidemic on New Year's Eve 2019, COVID-19, the disease that it causes, has spread to more than 90% of the countries in the world. Much like the virgin soil epidemics of the 1600s, no one is immune to it. However, armed with real knowledge of how diseases spread, 21st century technology, and near real-time communication across the globe, society is in a much better position to take responsibility for its people. As of May 2020, there have been over 1.2 million reported cases and 73,000 deaths in the US. Federal, state, and local governments have all stepped up to take responsibility for response at different levels. In efforts to slow the spread of the virus, the State Department has restricted international travel. Governors of various states have asked businesses to close until it is safe to reopen, and some counties are enforcing stringent stay-at-home policies. To help alleviate the strain on the people, the federal government passed a stimulus bill providing trillions of dollars to citizens and businesses. The states have relaxed unemployment insurance requirements, and local organizations have set up food banks across the country to help those in need. In the meantime, the people have taken on responsibility for themselves and those they care about by practicing social distancing and staying as informed as possible. For over 400 years, this land has been plagued by disease over and over again. Through the lens of history, we can see that some things may never change. Lack of knowledge incites fear, and fear can lead to conflict. The governments still decide which responsibilities to take on and which to leave to others. Millions have died, and society has been irrevocably changed multiple times over. Luckily, included in those changes are the ways that we as a society understand epidemics and our responsibilities to each other as we work together to survive and overcome these threats.
Get up, come on, get down with the sickness. Get up, come on, get down